I'm Yahya Abdullahi, representing the people of Kebbi North. I'm here to present a motion on the need for the Senate to intervene in the ongoing bid to concession the Zungeru hydroelectric power plant in Niger State. This bill, or this motion, is sponsored by distinguished Senator Gabriel Tosua Suswam and my humble self. The Senate knows that the Zungeru hydroelectric power plant, located in Zungeru, Niger State, is a 700 megawatt capacity electricity generating plant, a contract for which was originally awarded sometime in 2013 in the sum of $1.3 billion. It is considered the second largest hydroelectric plant in Nigeria after the Kainji Hydro Power Station, also in Niger State. The Senate notes also that apart from the huge loan secured by the federal government from the Export-Import Bank of China to fund the construction of the Zungeru hydropower plant, the National Assembly has, since the commencement of the construction work on the plant, approved billions of naira annually through its budgetary appropriation towards the completion of the plant. Over 43 billion was allocated to the Zungeru power plant under the 2022 Appropriation Act, and another 76.5 billion naira is being proposed for by the executive for the 2023 budget. The Senate observes that the Zungeru hydropower plant was expected to have been completed within 60 months from the date of execution of the contract in 2013, but several factors have threatened the speedy completion of the project. The Senate observes further that the Zungeru hydropower plant is expected upon completion to inject about 2.64 kilowatts per hour annually to the national grid, apart from other benefits such as water supply schemes, dry season farming and irrigation, flood control, aquatourism opportunities, and other economic activities that would emerge within and around the immediate communities where the project is located. The Senate is aware that the National Council on Privatization and its Secretariat, the Bureau for Public Enterprises, BPE, in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Power, had, in compliance with the provisions of the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission Act, invited interested investors to participate in a two-stage process that would lead to the selection of a concessionaire that would operate, maintain, and manage the Zungeru hydropower plant for a minimum of 30 years. The Senate is aware also that the invitation for submission of request of qualification was published in the Business Day newspapers of Thursday, 27th October 2022, and several mediums, including a roadshow, to further create awareness of the exercise. Senate notes that while it is within the statutory powers of National Council of Privatization and its Secretariat, the BPE, to implement and superintend over the privatization of the federal government assets, the strategic importance of Zungeru hydropower plant in ameliorating Nigeria's current power challenges calls for the immediate intervention of the Senate in the exercise of its constitutional responsibility to ascertain the implication of the proposed concession on government treasury and the power sector recovery program in particular. Senate notes also that the Senate's intervention at this point is further underscored by the need to ensure accountability for the huge annual budgetary allocations made to the project over the years. The issue of managing unsettled external loans tied to the project, the fate of unsettled host communities where the project is sited, and the need to generally establish whether the proposed concession of the plant is an exercise that will ensure that the government gets deserved value for funds expended in this project, as well as ensure that community-related conflicts do not arise after the takeover by prospective consignees. Senate recalls that in the past, the federal government has, through the National Council of Privatization and its secretariat, the BPE, implemented an ambitious program for the privatization of government-owned power assets. But several years since the completion of the privatization exercise in 2013, the performance of private new owners still remains a subject of controversy and recrimination in public circles. Hence the need for the government to be very, very wary and take precautions in the proposed concession of the Zungeru hydropower plant. Accordingly, Senate resolves to 1. Mandate the Committee on Power to investigate the circumstances and conditions under which the 700 megawatt Zungeru hydropower electric plant is being concessioned, particularly as it relates to the utilization of annual budgetary allocations made to the project, completion level of the project, the management of external loans from the Chinese Export-Import Bank, which are tied to the project, the fate of unsettled host communities where the project is sited, the adequacy or otherwise of selection criteria for the concessionaire, and to generally establish whether the proposed concession of the Zungeru hydropower plant is an exercise that would ensure that government gets the deserved value for funds expended on this project and report back to the Senate within 2 weeks. 2. Urge the National Council on Privatization and the Secretariat, the Bureau for Public Enterprises, and other MDAs concerned to suspend indefinitely the proposed concession of the 700 megawatt Zungeru hydroelectric power plant in Niger State, pending the conclusion of investigation by the Senate Committee on Power and the consequent adoption of the decision of the Senate based on the findings and recommendations of the committee. I so submit, Mr. President.
7 billion naira in that project, and as I'm talking, that project is within my senatorial district. It has not yet been completed. They've just been commissioning the first turbine. Looking at the amount that has been spent in that project, and looking at the fact that even if that project is completed 100% today, we do not have the capacity to be able to take all the power that it will generate into the national grid. I doubt if we'll be able to take up to 50%. Now you're talking about concessioning it when it is not yet commissioned, because when it is commissioned, it is assumed to have been completed. So, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, this motion have captured almost everything that we should consider. One, there is security implication. The whole of Shiroro local government where that project is located, because that project is not in Zungeru. Zungeru is Ushishi local government. But that project is located in Shiroro local government. So even the nomenclature of that project is wrong. Zungeru is supposed to have another hydro, which already they have done the impact assessments. The security situation in Shiroro local government, I have been here before several times talking about how even Boko Haram have set up camps in Shiroro local government. As I'm talking today, I don't know if the Chinese people that were kidnapped at that construction site have been released. So, is it going to be like the Jos disco, where force majeure was later declared? If we do it that way, that means we are just serving the interest of a few. Why do we have to concession that plant at this moment, when we know, even the BPE knows that all is not set in that place? If you look at the liquidity challenges that Nigeria is going to face too, who is going to be doing the repayment? Once that plant starts running, we're supposed to start the repayment? Who is going to do the repayment? How do they generate the money? They will fall back to the federal government. And why will the federal government have the money to pay for that? If you go further, today we are talking about subsidy in petroleum. Why must we then also do something that will come and bring the issue of subsidizing generation when we have not made the adequate arrangement to take care of all these things? Mr. President, I believe even the huge liabilities they have left now for not compensating my constituents, they have not been compensated. They cannot even farm because whenever they release the water, there is always flood there. We are not looking at how we take care of all these things. We are rushing to concession it. The ones who have concession, what have we achieved? Almost 16 years now. So I stand to second this motion, and we should call BPE to order. They should suspend it until when everything is clear. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Sadiq Umar.
I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people who are not and who all are. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, for me, the issues that makes me to be interested in this motion are three. One, there's a loan tied to this project. Two, we've been appropriating so much money into this project already. The communities have serious concerns about this project. And here we are already rich in experiences of concessioning in the last 2 decades. The success has been very, very poor. It's not been successful. Mr. President, I think that as representative of the people, we owe Nigerian people generally.
Photographer, this your flash. Please don't be flashing this thing inside the. Please. Don't use flash.
We have to protect the wealth of Nigerians. And nobody will do that except the parliament. And the best opportunity we have is to question decisions that have been taken without proper thinking being put into place. And that is our job. And I therefore support this motion that we look at these issues strategically, carefully, and technically, and take a decision before we allow this to be concession. Thank you, Mr. President.
It's suspicious. It's highly suspicious. If not, how could someone explain a project that billions of dollars, not naira, is being spent in making sure that it's fully done and completed? Now, we have not finished the project has not been concluded, and one is rushing to go a concession. Why the rush? Why the rush? Anybody, even an ordinary man on the streets, if he hears the story about this concession exercise, certainly he will be suspicious. And besides, sir, some concessions have been done on our power asset before now. What is the result? The whole exercise is not really going the way we want those things to be run, as a nation. And besides that, sir, our major problem that has impeded our zeal to get industrialized as a nation, to get a real sector up and doing, the major problem is that of power. And here we are. The government, in its wisdom, decided to bring forward this project. We've got a loan, and government is spending year in, year out, and some people are out there trying to cause confusion. Allow the project to be completed. Because if you concession it now, anybody who is successful in the exercise, probably after some time, he'll come with reasons, and then the project will get truncated. Mr. President, please, let these people understand our need as a nation. Let them help this country. Allow this project to be completed before taking any action to do with concession. Mr. President, I so submit.
Senator Yusuf Abubakar Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Yusuf Abubakar Yusuf. I represent Taraba Central. First of all, I support this motion, and also to draw the attention of the Senate that Zungeru hydropower project is not within the project under the mandate of BPE to either privatize, either through commercialization, partial commercialization, or full privatization. So, I mean, that's point number one. Number two, the project is financed by 15%, Chinese Exim Bank, and also, 85% Nigeria. So if you are privatizing, you are privatizing whose project? Now, number three, if they want to concession this, you can't concession project that is incomplete. And just like my previous colleagues, what they have said, we do not see any need to rush to concession this project in the light of what I have said. So if you can concession Zungeru, there's no reason why we cannot concession Mambila hydroelectricity power, because it is also a project in the pipeline. This one is an uncompleted project. So, Mr. Chairman, I support this motion. In the light of what I have said and what my colleagues have said, I think, Senate should intervene of this motion. Thank you very much.
The power sector apparently in Nigeria appears to be the one that the BPE will always rush to privatize or concession. And practically, it's this sector that has failed more than any other sector after privatization. Today, we pay Aqua Gas almost 10 billion every month, naira, for nothing. And there are about 2 more payments that cannot be justified that are done every month. We privatize the GENCOs, the DISCOs, and yet we have been going back to give them government money, 1.2 trillion or so. So there is no need for anyone to try to rush into concessioning Zungeru. Recently, most of the DISCOs were acquired by banks or something like that. They took money they couldn't pay back, and the banks took them over. So it's, BPE is better advised. We spend a lot of money on providing infrastructure one way or the other, and then we give them away for peanuts. One example, when in 2011 we investigated privatization of public enterprises between 1999 and 2011, the Aluminum Smelter Company of Nigeria in Akwa Ibom, the federal government spent $3.5 billion to establish that. And we sold it. No. We sold it for 150 million. And even then, only 100 million was paid. From $3.5 billion to $100 million. How can anyone justify this kind of thing? So it's better for the executive to listen to us, because we are not going to support this concessioning. And even if someone tries to, we will just reverse it. We are not going to accept this. The public loses too much. We are making ourselves poorer every day. Why should anyone rush to sell? How happy are we paying Aqua Gas 10 billion naira every month? We signed that agreement knowing fully well that we can't use the gas. We were expected to have 7 turbines, only 1 works. And you can't opt out of that agreement with Aqua Gas. The penalty is over $1 billion. And that was something that people signed. on behalf of government. So this one, the Senate, from the submissions, is totally against it. Let's suspend whatever we are doing. BP should stop. And we, of course, the National Council on Privatization is the one that will give BP to go ahead, but I'm sure NCP will not give that kind of approval. And if there is, we're advising that everything should be suspended. We'll go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Mandate the Committee on Power to investigate the circumstances and conditions under which the 700 megawatt Zungeru hydroelectric power plant has been concessioned, particularly as it relates to the utilization of annual budgetary allocations to the project, completion level of the project, the management of external loans from the Chinese Exim Bank, which are tied to the project, the fate of unsettled host communities where the project is sited, the adequacy or otherwise of selection criteria for the concessionaire, and to generally establish whether the proposed concession of the ZHPP is an exercise that will ensure that government get the deserved value for funds expended on this project, and to report back to the Senate within 2 weeks. Those in favor say aye. Those against any the ayes have it. And prayer 2. Urge the National Council on Privatization and its Secretariat, the Bureau of Public Enterprises, and other MDS concerned to suspend indefinitely the proposed concession of the 700 megawatt Zungeru hydroelectric power plant in Niger State, pending the conclusion of investigation by the Senate Committee on Power and the subsequent adoption of the decision of the Senate based on the findings and recommendations of the committee. Those in favor of prayer 2 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.